Welcome here to the FWA review, where I'm delighted to be joined by the Guardian's football correspondent Dom Fifield. You like your cricket too. A lot of the back pages are focused on the cricket. We're obviously not going to talk about it. It's the FWA review, but smug faces?
Well, it's a good way of distracting everybody from the fact we've just been hammered by New Zealand, isn't it?
So doing the British cricket writers a favour,
yeah.
our Aussie cousins. We'll move on. So we had to pick out a few of the sections and front pages that weren't cricket. This one amused us rather. Gareth, I need you this much, Harry. Has the events, though, of the last week proven that's not quite the case?
I wouldn't quite go that far yet. It was a good win in Holland, but it was just the next step and the next stage of a long journey that's going to go beyond this World Cup. It's going to be 2020, 2022 with the England national team. There is still a lack of cutting edge. A lot of their approach play is very impressive. I mean, they were great moving the ball quickly in Amsterdam on Friday, but you know, with Harry Kane in the team, we've got more chance of finishing those moves. So I think he scored 7 of England's last 14 goals prior to Jesse Lingard's winner on Friday. So there's evidence that we need him, and you know, the sooner he's back, the better.
A nice piece from Jonathan Norcroft simulating that. It's time to get creative, but there's one particular line in that I like. An English Toni Kroos will not drop out of the sky before June 18th, so Southgate is being realistic. It's that creative force, isn't it, that we're going to really struggle with.
It's become a bit of a holy grail, search for the holy grail for the England national team, to find this creative midfielder that's going to unlock stubborn defences, but we're not going to pluck one out of the ether prior to this tournament.
And with Jack's injury now.
And I'm not even convinced that Jack Wilshere, even in his pomp, would have been that player. So he spoke very well on Friday night after the game, Gareth, saying we have to play in a slightly different way. We move the ball quicker, we let the ball do the work, really. So Jordan Henderson was playing as that sort of deeper lying pivot, and there were midfielders in front of him were more offensive, and that seemed to work there. But you know, let's not get carried away. The Dutch were terrible. I mean, if Friday illustrated anything, it illustrated how far they've fallen in world football standings. It's an appalling performance from them. But promising nevertheless for England.
Quite a performance from Gareth Southgate ahead of that match in terms of how he dealt with the politics and the problems of security in Russia. Took on the forest.
Well, he is impressive. He's incredibly impressive when he speaks. He's very intelligent, and that comes across in everything that he says in our press conferences even. His point on Boris Johnson was well made on Thursday. The fact that he's got no interest at all in what the Foreign Secretary has to say, which I think struck a chord with many of those in the room. But most pertinently, his views on racism, how we have to clean up our own act first before we can start being hypercritical of potential problems in Russia. I think that's absolutely spot on. And he relayed a story to us, Troy Townsend, education officer at Kick It Out, coming in to a coaches meeting at St George's Park earlier this month, and just showing them it was actually an Instagram post that Stephen Gerrard had put up following an under-16s team win in the Florida Cup against Brazil a few years back, I think it was, and the abuse underneath this post was shocking, and it illustrated that this is a problem that is closer to home. We can't think we've eradicated racism around football in this country, and we're hoping that everything goes well in the summer in Russia. We know there have been issues, high-profile issues in Eastern Europe, but let's make sure we got our act together first before we start throwing stones.
We're going to come on to racism in football again in some depth later, but as we talk about our own house in order, and as he said that, then our people coming to Amsterdam and calling themselves football fans and behaving like that. Banham, the FA Chiefs, are planning to come down hard. They've put out some very strong signals and messages on this, that they're going to root out those fans and make sure they don't get to travel to Russia.
Yeah, I mean, look, that fixture was a powder keg. It was always going to be potential trouble there. The last England away game of the season, ahead of the World Cup, where in Russia, where a lot of people won't be going to that tournament. So this was their moment. This was their sort of away day occasion, and I think everybody around that fixture, police, FA, authorities, they all knew that there was potential for trouble there. and it did manifest itself in the city, not in the stadium as far as I could see, but in the city
they're probably not going
over
to
the
the
2
game.
days. Well, absolutely.
Back to the football. You're my number one. Someone were trying to prove that's not the case against Italy and Ballon, but how impressed were you by Pickford against the Netherlands, although unfortunately just not under the pressure that Gareth Southgate would have also liked to have seen him under?
No, and you're absolutely right. They didn't test him nearly as much as they should have done in what would have been traditionally quite a difficult fixture. But look, his distribution is obviously his main asset, and he was excellent on that front. He had a part to play even in the winning goal that stemmed from him and his intervention. He's a player of huge promise. He's had a difficult season again at Everton, but he'd probably look at it as quite an easier season than last year when he was at Sunderland, and it was all going so horribly wrong there. So I think he's a developing talent and hopefully a goalkeeper for a long time to come with England. But Jack Butland will have a say in this.
Yes.
He will have an opportunity against the Italians to show that he should be number one as well.
And he's made it clear, a real statement, that he's good in possession too. Can't rule him out.
Absolutely. It's good. I mean, Butland actually made the point to us post-match on Friday that the competition for place is good going into World Cup. We also look at it and we want to know for certain who's going to be in each position. I think Gareth Southgate does know, and that's all that really matters.
And then there's depth behind,
Yeah.
which is...
And we haven't said that very often about the
Well,
England
it's strange.
team.
It's something else that might be coming up later too. The Look of Champions is what Crossy writes about here, about how Manchester City are influencing, and we always have this Liverpool influencing ahead of the last World Cup going into Brazil, but is this, we thought it was quite a Tottenham influenced team, but of course we're now getting the Manchester City influence. Stones.
I'd branch it out. I mean, the City one is the most obvious because, I mean, look at Raheem Sterling's rejuvenation at City, or development at City over recent times. Stones likewise, although Stones hasn't been playing very often for City in recent months. But I think of all 10 outfield players who started on Friday were from the top 4. And I think that says a lot. They're all getting high-level coaching at their clubs. We'll probably see the transformation more evidently in the clubs that are coached by a Pep and a Pep Guardiola or a Jurgen Klopp, I guess, because by the very nature of the type of football they're playing. Mauricio Pochettino as well, I guess. And that is sort of revolutionary. It feels revolutionary in the English game still. But it can't be bad, can it, that these guys are getting this level of coaching and developing their own games to this extent.
Shock and outrage. Jose Mourinho is also getting performances out of players. Rashford and obviously just
Well, he's
ready
been
to
the
give
success
chance.
story of United's
He
season,
really has.
really. He's there was a great goal the other day, and he looks increasingly the part. He's sort of filled in. He's been a utility player at United for some time. He played right back at Palace the other week when they were pushing for a recovery and then a winner. But what he does keeps things relatively simple, and he seems to get bringing dividends for him at the moment. And he looks the part in an England shirt as well, and that's more strength and depth, because I wouldn't necessarily think that he will start against Italy, but you know that Southgate would have no qualms whatsoever about throwing him in at any point and knowing that he'll do a job for him.
Nice Oscars won the Mirror talking about how we have all these academies, but actually the majority of the squad all had to go out on loan, do it the tough way. I think Alfie Mawson's probably the prime example, has come all the way
Well, Nick
from
Pope doing
Nick
his
Pope, of course.
milk round, wasn't it, 9 years back over in Cambridgeshire. It's become the modern way, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, Chelsea have 3 first-team squads worth of players out on loan, and they're all gaining game time elsewhere. By the very nature of the big clubs hoovering up the talent, I guess.
Yeah.
You'll see more and more dropping down and getting their game time at lower levels. But when you see, guys who've been in non-league football and have then built their careers up in the lower leagues, like your Mawsons and your Popes, and it does offer hope to everybody that they're always in with a chance of making it big at the top level.
Yeah, all the way from Conference South all the way up.
Yeah, staggering.
Incredible story.
Well, I think Pope was the 7th tier of non-league football.
Oh, right at the bottom, and on the milk round. Double whammy. A bit further afield, and a special report from Adam Carlton on Panama, and an English under-21s coach that was actually a senior coach. Really nice insight on away from the cynicism of sport. This is so excited for Panama. They had a National Days holiday after they qualified, but a lot of heartache to get there, the sacrifices of the players that simply couldn't afford to be playing, and it's a really nice background.
Yeah, we'll get a few more of those, that type of piece in the build-up to the World Cup, because there's an interest in England's opponents, and Panama are the great unknowns, Tunisia to a lesser extent, I suppose. But yeah, and Adam, I think, is multilingual as well, so that's probably helped him in that one. We sent Sid Lowe, I think, to Copenhagen. I think they played Denmark last week, lost 1-0, and he was doing some work around Panama then. So you'll see more and more of these feature ideas creeping into the papers in the months to come out.
Andy Dunn, not mincing his words, I thought it was an interesting discussion. Hale Hendo, captain, leader, and best worst player in the game. I ouched at that, but it's flattery to.
He has got bad press over the years, hasn't he, Jordan Henderson? Probably a bit unfairly. I thought he played well on Friday. I thought he did a really good job for Southgate. It's probably arguably one of his best performances for England. And I think he's another player that is developing quietly but impressively at Liverpool under Jurgen Klopp.
Certainly a player that came in with the high expectations, or with the moniker of the next Steven Gerrard under him, but he really, in his position, is a very solid player.
He's quite prickly in his press conferences though, but we probably deserve that for the press we've given him over the years.
Probably why. A very sad but very touching story, and particularly sad as we're here in the training ground, in the sun pull-out on Igakio, who's sadly coming up to the anniversary of the day he tragically passed away after having a heart attack here at the training ground. Not just Gareth Southgate, he will be paying tribute with him by using the Do Something Kind hashtag, which was the last tweet that he'd put out. He helped out a homeless girl. But also there's a very nice follow-up inside on the youth academy, and we know how many of the now senior players that we know who were coached by him and cared dearly for him, but there's now a life-size picture of him as they come up to the academy in tribute, and it's a very touching tribute. And
nice intro from Mike McGrath on that piece.
Yeah, really nice from Mike McGrath, and his wife, who's been incredibly brave. There's been so many fundraising and social initiatives with the Premier League, and wish the whole family well. That's a really touching tribute in at the Sun. An article that you'll be quite glad to see written, weren't you? On Stephen Reid, the Crystal Palace assistant coach, who's doing fantastically well. We've heard about black coaches coming in now to the England system, and it was a real blow to lose Ugo, because he was very much one of the rising stars. But in Steve, we've got a real champion.
Yeah, he's doing a very quietly impressive job with Roy Hodgson at Palace over this season. He's doing his pro license. It was quite interesting. I mean, he's all for sort of the visibility of him as a black man making his way in the coaching world. But he says on the pro license there's only him and Jason Ewell of the sort of BAME candidates actually on that coaching course, which he acknowledges sort of sums up where we're at. But the hope is that the more success he enjoys, and he is very visible on the touchline at Selhurst Park, that he acts as a role model and inspires the next generation coming through.
Another shocking biography that's come out. You followed up, Neil Ashton's followed up, Vince Hilaire, and some of the chants pulled up by his hair. I mean, some really quite awful experiences.
Yeah, you see, Vince wasn't particularly comfortable going over those, particularly when we did that interview down in Portsmouth last week. It was almost as if when he was playing 70s, 80s, it was all taken for granted. This is what happened. This is what we go through. We expect this type of behaviour, and some of the stories are absolutely shocking. But if you want an illustration of how they sort of accepted it, he talks there about the Palace fans when he's coming out and he's making his mark from the Palace youth team into the first team. The first chant they adopted for him, as in an affectionate way, was singing "We've Got a Brown Boy on the Wing," tra-la-la-la, to the Boney M song. And when he first heard it, he didn't know whether to he didn't know how to react really. I mean, he clapped it, and actually in the end it was sort of the adulation that he took on, and that's what he wanted, and that's what drove him on. Vince Hilaire is an iconic figure at virtually all the clubs he played for, particularly Palace and Pompey. And there's a bit of Leeds in there as well. It's a great book written with Tom Maslona, who has done a really good job bringing together an awful lot of anecdotes that Vince has come out with. But there is this underlying theme in there that just what these guys had to go through and what they had to put up with as a matter of course. And these days, any time it's unacceptable, and you just really pray that black players coming through now don't have to put up with the same.
Yeah, which Gareth Southgate is highlighting, and hopefully we are slowly progressing, but too slow. We all know that. On a positive front, a nice tribute here to Harrison's paying tribute to Villa, helping him through the New York Academy, and now he's setting the Manchester City team alight. So it's a nice little tribute for one of the biggest stars in the game, and how actually can the
it'll be interesting to see how his development goes over there in the States, and quite how far he can progress, because the call up to the 21s, wasn't it, last time around, and a lot was made of that because it was so unusual for somebody who was virtually unknown over here to sort of come back into the fold. But that's, the problem is going to be labelled. I suppose people will wonder whether that's a sort of gimmicky selection. He has to go out there and now prove that what he is picking up from people like David Villa is doing his career benefit.
So maybe dare we say that these major clubs may give opportunities to our youngsters. How did it feel to be manager of United lonely? James Nursey, Ryan taking on the big task of Wales now, but he's been opening up on his pressures at United.
Yeah, it was, even for an icon of that club to have been thrown into the deep end there and taking over initially on that caretaker basis, not an easy. And United had such a terrible and traumatic first season post Ferguson, so it was a difficult one for him to be thrown in at. But he has a chance now. We were sort of waiting for Ryan Giggs to take up the mantle at a coaching role where he was comfortable since that United experience, and Wales seems a good fit. He'll obviously command the respect of that dressing room, and it will allow him to get his coaching across to that team and make it his own, because they were in a good place under Chris Coleman. They did make progress. Okay, they didn't qualify for the World Cup, but we all know what they did at the Euros. There's a lot of quality there, and he can tap into that, fingers crossed.
And Adrian Kajumba has popped over to Germany to do a nice piece on Jadon Sancho, who is doing brilliantly well over in Germany. It's a really nice piece into his development, why it's seeming such a good opportunity for our youth, which is a real shame when we've got St George's Park bringing on so many players.
Yeah. But it's almost like that's probably one of the. I think it's good news that they're going and experiencing it. There's another lad, Mandela Egbo, at Borussia Mönchengladbach, and has broken into the first team there, who's an England junior international as well. I suppose that they're almost the last generation that wouldn't have been based purely around St George's Park, possibly, and they are going to benefit from the German system of youth football development. Interesting that he was late for a training session and got omitted from the under 17s or 18s team the other day, so he's still got plenty to learn. We can't get ahead of ourselves, but a player of huge promise.
Certainly over the last week we've had highlighted to us the progression of the youth system, the DNA, St George's Park. What we're now being asked for is patience, possession play, passing out from the back. If that clumsy goal goes in,
how we react, isn't it? I mean, the problem Gareth Southgate's going to have is that he's having to implement a philosophy over a week here, a week there to work with the players, and whether he can impose that and get them learning exactly how he wants them to play in that time remains to be seen. I think we have to go to the World Cup this summer with a real sense of realism as to how far England can go. If they get to the quarterfinals, then that should be seen as a triumph. If they play well and then play in the style that Southgate has tried to implement, and they don't quite manage to get that far, then I still think we pluck the positives from that and we move on to 2020. There's a lot going right, but it's still early days in this journey, and that's going to go on for a while yet.
Watch this space. Thank you for joining us. You can keep up to date with all the latest from the Football Writers Association, www.footballwriters.co.uk. For now, bye-bye.